Do you believe in time travel? What if we told you right now that there are real documented cases that prove exactly that? And if you think that time travel only exists in movies and that there always has to be a logical explanation for everything, then we're really curious to hear how you're going to explain these 10 mysterious cases. So let's jump straight into the first case. And this one is truly intense. Number 10. The mysterious disappearance of Thomas Johnson. This case you're about to hear is one of the most mysterious time travel stories ever recorded. Imagine you're taking a walk to a lake on a sunny summer afternoon to go for a swim, and just a few minutes later you find yourself in a completely different world. A futuristic world where cars glide through the air and artificial intelligence has long taken control. A world that feels familiar, and yet so completely different that you wonder if you're stuck inside some kind of dream. An absolutely insane thought, but according to old police records, that is exactly what a boy named Thomas claimed he experienced. In the summer of 1912, 15-year-old Thomas Johnson vanished without a trace from a small town in the state of Minnesota. It was a warm afternoon in June when he went with friends to a nearby lake to swim. But suddenly, without any warning, a strange wind picked up, and the water in the middle of the lake began to rotate, like a whirlpool that spun faster and faster. His friends later reported that Thomas laughed out loud before jumping into the rotating water to get a closer look. But just a few seconds later, he was gone. No scream, no trace, no piece of clothing, only the churning water and an eerie silence. Search teams found nothing, no body, no sign of what had actually happened to Thomas. People assumed he had drowned, swallowed by the water. His family and friends mourned for months, but eventually all that remained was the memory of the cheerful boy who simply never came back that summer day. The years passed, the world changed, and nobody ever thought they would hear the name Thomas Johnson again. But 58 years later, in 1970, a strange-looking teenager suddenly appeared, barefoot, confused, wearing old-fashioned clothes. He introduced himself as Thomas Johnson. At first, people assumed he was delusional or mentally ill. But when investigators found old family photos, they froze. The boy looked exactly like Thomas Johnson in 1912. Even the tiny scar on his chin was identical. For the world, 58 years had passed. But for Thomas, it seemed like only a few minutes. When questioned, Thomas said the water around him suddenly began to glow. Then everything was covered in a bright, blinding light, accompanied by a strange humming sound. After that, everything turned black. When he opened his eyes again, he was standing on the shore of a lake, but the world was no longer the same. Cars rushed past him that he didn't recognize, and the people around him looked like they came from another time. Later, Thomas visited the place where it all began once more. He stood at the shore of the same lake, looked at the still water, and said he remembered the exact spot where he vanished, as if it had happened only yesterday. Some people believe Thomas stumbled into a so-called time portal, an invisible passage. That directly connects 2 points in time, in this case, the year 1912 and the year 1970. Some physicists even speak of wormholes, tiny, unstable connections in the fabric of space-time that could theoretically allow travel between different moments. Others believe the case of Thomas Johnson was caused by what they call a time rip. A time rip is like a tear in the structure of reality itself, a moment in which two timelines overlap for just a brief moment. Anyone standing in exactly the wrong place at exactly that moment could, at least theoretically, be flung from one time directly into another. It sounds unbelievable, but how else do you explain a boy who vanished in 1912 suddenly appearing in 1970 without having aged a single day? Is it possible that at certain locations the laws of time simply stop applying? Or is the Minnesota lake more than just a lake, a portal to another time? Are there things we humans don't understand, let alone explain? The case of Thomas Johnson remains one of the most baffling mysteries of modern times. And trust me, that was only the beginning. The truly shocking cases are still ahead of us. Subscribe to the channel and give the video a like. It's completely free and helps us continue creating these exciting videos. Thank you so much. Number 9. The Mysterious Time Traveler. This case is absolutely insane, and you'll barely be able to believe it, but it really happened and was even captured on surveillance cameras. A man walked into a garden shed and never came out again, at least not as the young man who originally walked inside. In April 2024, the Airbnb host Alec Schaal was routinely checking the security cameras on his Florida property. The footage shows his garden, the driveway, and a small, unimpressive wooden shed in the backyard, a simple storage shed Schaal used for tools. But on that day, one of his cameras captured something that left him speechless. Early in the afternoon, a young man walked onto the property. He appeared calm, almost determined, carrying a dark backpack and moving as if he knew exactly where he was going. Without hesitation, he walked toward the shed, opened the door, and disappeared inside. The camera kept recording, and Schaal watched everything live on his phone. But the man never came back out. Minutes turned into hours, and the shed door didn't move. Confused, Schaal called the police. When officers arrived, they searched the entire property and finally the shed itself. Inside, however, they found nothing. No trace of the man, no backpack, no hole or damage suggesting an escape. The door had been locked from the inside, and the shed had no windows, no vents, no openings of any kind. It was simply impossible for the young man to have left the shed without being seen. The police filed a report, but the investigation uncovered no new information. Schaal watched the video again and again, rewinding and replaying it, looking for cuts or glitches, but found nothing. The footage is uninterrupted with no signs of manipulation. The man went in and vanished. The next day, almost to the exact same minute, the camera recorded movement again. The shed door slowly opened, and an older man stepped out. He had gray hair, hollow cheeks, and moved slowly across the lawn. His posture was the same, his height was identical, and even his facial features strongly resembled those of the young man from the day before. Only the age was different. It looked as if the same man had aged decades in just one day. Both men, the young and the old, wore glasses. But sharp-eyed viewers noticed something strange. The older man's glasses were a completely different model, with thick, angular frames resembling eyewear from the 1980s. This detail raises an extremely puzzling question. Could the young man have traveled into the past inside the shed? Maybe to a time somewhere between the 1950s and 1980s? If he lived there for decades and then returned to the present, it would explain his aged face and the retro glasses. Another strange detail: the older man no longer had a backpack. Some believe the backpack contained something connected to his disappearance, maybe a device he used inside the shed. Did this man actually spend decades in another time and then return as if nothing had happened? A fascinating idea. Many believe the man was a time traveler who deliberately came to that exact spot because it's a location where time travel is possible. There's a very interesting theory about this. Some researchers believe that if time travel is possible at all, it can't happen just anywhere. It requires extremely specific physical conditions, magnetic anomalies, energy concentrations, or crossing points of so-called Earth ley lines, where space and time are thinner than anywhere else, places where reality itself becomes unstable. Exactly such a spot is said to exist on Alec Schaal's property. Maybe this place wasn't random at all. Maybe the young man knew exactly what he planned to do, or he was even sent there. If that's true, then this unimpressive shed in Florida is far more than a storage room. It's a gateway, basically a portal, connecting different times. Totally fascinating. A young man enters a shed and disappears. An older man walks out a day later, through the same door, at the same location. How is something like that even possible? Eventually, the investigation was closed. The police found no logical explanation for the incident, and the video is still considered authentic today. No cuts, no signs of editing, no manipulation. So who are these two mysterious men, and what exactly were they doing in that shed? Or are they not two different people at all, but the same man? Was a real time traveler caught on camera here? Absolutely insane. But the next case puts everything you've heard so far completely in the shadows. Before we continue, here's a quick question for you. If you could travel to any time for one day, which year would you choose? Just write your answer in the comments below. We're excited to see what everyone picks. Number 8. The Secret Time Travel Program. We have to admit, this case sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, and yet the man swears that everything happened exactly the way he describes it. An alleged time traveler claims he was sent to 17th century China as part of a secret government project, and as proof, he shows a mysterious photo that continues to spark intense debate today. The man, whose face is blurred and whose voice is distorted, says that in the 1980s he worked in a secret underground research complex in London, a project with the codename Globus. There, he claims, scientists from the United States, Great Britain, and Russia worked together on technologies meant to break the boundaries of space and time. Absolutely fascinating. He describes a laboratory filled with experiments, teleportation, hybrid beings, even devices that could move matter over short distances. But the most spectacular invention was a machine they called the Time Queen, a device capable of sending people through time. Its power source, he says, was a fragment of an asteroid that emitted a completely unknown type of radiation, an energy so powerful that it could destroy entire planets if it ever went out of control. But in their laboratory, they learned how to control and calculate this dangerous energy, translating it into mathematical algorithms that allowed the barriers of time to bend. With this, the man claims, they could open portals to the past and the future. He says he was part of a top-secret unit called Quantum, which was sent to 17th century China. The mission, to secure historical artifacts and collect temporal data. But the mission failed. He got lost, was hunted by soldiers, and during his escape, he lost a small modern Swiss ring watch. Centuries later, that exact watch was reportedly discovered in an ancient Chinese soldier's tomb. Many believe that this is the same watch that became known online in 2008 as the Ming watch, a tiny Swiss ring watch found inside a sealed Ming dynasty tomb. And there are in fact online reports confirming that such a watch was found, an artifact that simply shouldn't exist there because it comes from a completely different time. Is this mysterious man actually telling the truth? Was he really part of a secret time travel program and sent into the past? Hard to believe. During the interview, he holds a photo up to the camera, showing himself holding a metallic ring. He calls it a symbol of his time travel team, forged from a material that existed only in their laboratory. The ring, he claims, acted as an identification device and a control unit that could activate time coordinates. Some even believe it was a safety anchor, a device meant to pull travelers back in case of emergency. The man says, "Many of us never came back," and shortly after, he adds the sentence that fascinated the entire internet. "I was one of the ones they managed to bring back." Viewers noticed that the ring in the photo really does contain an unusual structure inside, like thin lines or wires. So is this actually a piece of advanced technology? The theory he hints at sounds crazy, but it's extremely interesting. He explains that the energy of the Time Queen, this so-called time machine, is based on asteroid particles whose radiation creates a temporal gateway. And according to him, these gateways exist only at a few precisely calculable locations on Earth. Only where the planet's magnetic field and energy flow align perfectly can time travel work. If all of this is true, then the key to time travel isn't the traveler. It's the location. To this day, no one knows who this man really was. But many keep asking, was he a real time traveler or just someone with a vivid imagination? Who knows? Are you ready for something even more intense? Then pay close attention now. Number 7. The mysterious man from the year 2299. What you're about to hear is one of the most puzzling cases ever connected to time travel. A Russian engineer claimed that he met a man who came from the year 2029. And here's the crazy part. The encounter supposedly happened during a scientific experiment in front of several witnesses. The engineer's name was Vadim Chernobrov. He was an aerospace engineer and led a project in the 1990s called Cosmopoisk, which investigated unexplained phenomena, from UFOs to so-called time fields. But unlike many others, Chernobrov didn't just want to develop theories. He wanted real, measurable evidence. He and his team built a machine made of several metal rings that rotated in opposite directions and generated a powerful electromagnetic field. With this setup, they wanted to test whether time inside the field could be altered, even if only slightly. During the first experiments, they actually discovered something. The clocks inside the machine ticked differently by tiny fractions of a second compared to the clocks outside. Minuscule but measurable deviations. To Chernobrov, the first sign that time might really be influenceable. Very, very fascinating. In the following weeks, the team repeated the experiment again and again, documenting everything meticulously and refining the technology. But one day in 1996, something happened that nobody, absolutely nobody, expected. The machine suddenly began to glow unusually bright, the air started to vibrate, and a shimmering ripple filled the room, as if the light itself had turned into liquid. And then, right in the middle of the laboratory, a mysterious man appeared out of nowhere. He was calm, spoke Russian, but with an oddly old-fashioned tone. Everything about him seemed strange. He introduced himself as Yevgeny Gaiduchok and said he came from the year 2299. At first, the researchers thought it was a bad joke. With all the time experiments Chernobrov and his team were conducting, it seemed obvious that someone might be trying to prank them. But Yevgeny knew technical terms and concepts that nobody back then could have understood. He spoke about resonance energy that powered entire cities, about conscious computers that made decisions for humans, and about bodies rejuvenated through nanotechnology. He knew things about Earth, magnetic fields, and energy flows that would only be described scientifically decades later. His clothing was made of a metallic, shimmering fabric that didn't react to heat, moisture, or pressure. Analysis revealed that the material had no known chemical structure, as if it simply wasn't from this world. Yevgeny explained that in his time he was a scientist, part of a project researching so-called time projections, attempts to look into the past through energy fields. But during one of the experiments, something went wrong. The time field collapsed, and he was pulled through it, directly into Chernobrov's laboratory. The researchers listened in awe. Yevgeny seemed calm, almost melancholic. But after a few hours he grew restless. He kept glancing at the machine, which was still faintly glowing, and eventually said, "They will bring me back." But who exactly did he mean by they? The researchers from the year 2299? Moments later, the machine's light flickered again. A blinding flash shot through the room, and when it faded, Yevgeny Gaiduchok was gone without a trace. Chernobrov was stunned. He later explained that in his view, time is an energy field, something that can bend under certain conditions, similar to a magnetic field. Many considered him a madman, but his notes, calculations, and diagrams still exist today in Russian archives. Some believe that Chernobrov's time experiment in the 1990s and the one in the year 2299 were connected in a mysterious way. Maybe the two time fields met for a brief moment, like two waves crossing. And right at that intersection, Yevgeny Gaiduchok appeared, in the middle of Chernobrov's laboratory, Did this man really come from the year 2029? Are time travels truly possible? An extremely fascinating thought. And this is nothing compared to what's coming next. Number 6. The secret manipulation of the timelines. Is it possible that the reality we experience isn't the original version of our history? That someone, or something, has been tampering with time in the background? This question lies at the center of the research of David Wilcock, an American author and speaker who has spent more than 2 decades discussing topics like consciousness, quantum physics, time travel, and secret government programs. He is convinced that time is not a fixed line, but a living network of possibilities constantly reshaping itself. Wilcock is also absolutely certain that governments and military groups have been working for decades on projects designed to influence the course of time. He points to experiments like the so-called Philadelphia Project and the Montauk program, research from the 1940s through the 1980s, in which scientists allegedly tried to manipulate space and time. According to him, these attempts never stopped. They simply continued in secret, with the goal of optimizing timelines, to guide and control the future of humanity. But Wilcock goes even further. He says that time is not just a physical dimension. It has a consciousness, just like we humans. Every action, every thought, every collective event sends out vibrations that imprint themselves onto the fabric of time. And when enough people emit the same energy, fear, hope, destruction, or peace, time itself begins to shift its direction. It sounds unbelievable, but it explains why, according to Wilcock, major events in human history appear in recurring patterns. Wars, upheavals, inventions, they seem to repeat themselves at certain intervals, like echoes from previous cycles. He calls this the cosmic rhythm of time, a kind of universal heartbeat connecting all life. His theory: if this rhythm is understood, one can not only travel through time, but also harmonize or rewrite entire timelines. A single intervention could be enough to push the future into a completely new direction. One action, one decision, one collective thought. Wilcock claims that certain secret groups, so-called timeline guardians, use exactly this power. They supposedly altered history multiple times to prevent or delay catastrophic events. Every time they intervene, reality splits and a new timeline emerges, while the old one continues to exist, but remains unreachable to us. Perhaps, Wilcock says, this is why we experience strange phenomena, déjà vu, inconsistencies, missing memories, clues that we are no longer on the original line. He calls it the time shadow effect, small cracks in perception that occur when 2 realities overlap. But what exactly drives this manipulation of timelines? And now it gets truly fascinating, because Wilcock is convinced that Earth itself is part of a larger galactic cycle, a 25,920-year precession cycle, in which the solar system moves through different energetic regions of the galaxy. Each of these regions influences the structure of time. When humanity is ready to complete a cycle, Wilcock says massive shifts occur in the collective consciousness, and reality itself can adapt or transform. In his lectures, he describes this phase, the one we're in right now, as a transition between worlds, a moment when old systems collapse and a new form of humanity emerges, one that no longer perceives time as a linear limitation, but as an open field. Critics call all of this esoteric nonsense, while supporters call it future science. But no matter what you call it, the idea is undeniably fascinating. Because if Wilcock is right, then our thoughts, emotions, and decisions truly influence time itself. And that is extremely interesting. And if someone really knows how to alter timelines, then we must inevitably ask ourselves the following question. Are we already living in a manipulated version of reality, created by forces that determine where humanity is supposed to go? And that was still harmless. The next case shatters every concept imaginable. Number 5. Bielek. the man who lived in the year 2749. This case is by far one of the most fascinating time travel stories out there, and once you've heard it, you'll understand why. It's about Bielek, a man who claimed to have traveled into the distant future, not just a few years ahead, but more than 700 years forward, into the year 2749. Extremely thrilling. His story begins with one of the most famous experiments in military history, the Philadelphia experiment. In 1943, the U.S. Navy was working on a top-secret project in which a warship, the USS Eldridge, was supposed to be made invisible using electromagnetic fields. But something went horribly wrong. Bielek, who claimed he was an officer on board, described how the ship was suddenly surrounded by a blinding field of energy. The air vibrated, metal parts began to melt, and many crew members lost control of their bodies. Then, complete darkness. When the light came back, the ship was no longer in the harbor of Philadelphia, but hundreds of miles away in Norfolk, Virginia. Some men were fused into the steel of the ship, others had simply vanished. A truly horrific scenario. Bielek and his brother Duncan jumped overboard in panic, and in that exact moment, their time journey began. They woke up in a completely different era, the year 2137. There, they found themselves lying in a futuristic hospital. He described the entire room as being filled with a soft bluish light. No staff, no cables, no visible devices. The beds were floating just above the ground, and a quiet, soothing voice spoke to them from the wall. It wasn't a human. It was an artificial intelligence monitoring all their vital functions and healing their injuries. In this time, around the year 2137, Earth had changed dramatically. Large parts of the coastal regions were flooded, many cities destroyed. The climate was unstable, and technological superpowers had joined together in a global network to save humanity. Bielek said that Europe was almost completely reshaped and had new borders. There were hardly any conventional wars anymore. The biggest conflicts were decided by technology, not by weapons. After a few weeks in the year 2137, he was shifted again. This time far into the future, into the year 2749. What he saw there sounds like a mix of science fiction and paradise. Gigantic floating cities hovering above the oceans, controlled by a central superintelligence. This AI, a kind of consciousness network, controlled all life on the planet. There were no governments anymore, no countries, no armies. Humanity lived in regional clusters that governed themselves, and decisions were no longer made by politicians, but by artificial consciousness. Bielek spoke about a world where machines and humans had completely merged. Energy was unlimited, diseases no longer existed, and communication took place telepathically, directly on the level of thought. He said that in this era, humanity had learned to live in harmony with Earth and the universe. Every action, every thought, every feeling was part of a collective system, a shared consciousness that belonged to no one alone. He stayed there for almost 2 years before he was, without understanding how, brought back to the year 1943. Back into a body that was older, but carried memories of 2 different futures. Later, he worked to uncover the truth behind the Philadelphia experiment and told his story in numerous interviews and lectures. Always calm, precise, as if he were recalling something that actually happened. Never wavering, never contradicting himself. To this day, the case of Bielek is considered one of the most detailed accounts of time travel in modern history, and it raises questions nobody can truly answer. What if the Philadelphia experiment was actually an attempt to open portals and enable time travel? Did this man really travel into the distant future and even live there for 2 years? An unbelievable thought. That was already insane. But the next case throws everything into question. Number 4. The Cairo Papyrus Time Vision. The oldest evidence of time travel. This case is completely different from all the others, older, more mysterious, and deeply fascinating. A mysterious document from antiquity that still confuses historians, archaeologists, and researchers today. An Egyptian papyrus that tells of a journey through time, thousands of years before that word even existed. The so-called Cairo Papyrus was discovered in the early 20th century in the archives of the Egyptian Museum. It dates back to the time of Pharaoh Thutmose III, around 1450 BC, an era in which Egypt was at the height of its power. What makes it so special is not its age, but its mysterious content. In faded brown hieroglyphs, the text describes an event that, by modern standards, sounds completely impossible. It says that one night, the pharaoh saw a sky ship in the heavens, hovering above the city like a circle of fire. From this ship, the papyrus reports, men descended, men who were neither young nor old, and spoke like gods. They were brought straight into the palace, where they led the pharaoh into a chamber that did not belong to this world. There, the text continues, the king saw visions, images from other times, battles, cities, faces. And then comes the most puzzling sentence in the entire document. The king saw himself, but not as a king, instead as a child who is yet to be born. For many historians, this sounds like a religious tale, but now it gets really interesting, because others, especially researchers who study ancient myths about space and time, believe that something else is being described here. A very early account of a time travel experience. The text also says that the men from the sky opened the order of time and led the pharaoh through the gates of light. What if these gates of light are a metaphorical description of a time portal, a bridge between past and future? Some esoteric researchers are convinced the Cairo Papyrus is the oldest surviving evidence of time travel. And Pharaoh Thutmose III may have been the first human ever to look into the future. One particularly exciting section of the text mentions that the skymen gave the king an object, a kind of luminous stone that holds time. It was supposed to be stored in a golden vessel and pulse with the breath of life. Some Egyptologists compare this description to the so-called Ben stone legend, the symbol of divine energy that supposedly fell from the sky. What if this stone was actually a piece of advanced technology? Something that allowed the pharaoh to enter states in which he could see different points in time, almost like a projection of the future. The text says that he saw cities floating on the water and people who carry fire in their hands. A stunning description, because it strongly reminds us of modern skyscrapers, airplanes, and electrical devices. The papyrus scroll ends abruptly. The last sentence reads, "The men rose back into the sky, and the king remained silent about what he had seen." The discovery of the papyrus triggered heated debates among scholars. Many considered it a mythological story, others a coded ritual document. But there are researchers who are convinced that the text was originally much longer, and that the missing part was deliberately removed to protect a secret that the world was not meant to understand. If the Cairo Papyrus really describes what we today would call time travel, then it would be the oldest known mention of a technological intervention in time, more than 3,000 years old. Truly fascinating. Who were these mysterious men who suddenly appeared in ancient Egypt in a ship from the sky? Were they time travelers from a distant future, or even from another universe? Did these enigmatic men give Pharaoh Thutmose a device that made it possible to see the future? And if so, where is this device today? Shouldn't it still exist somewhere? Who knows? Maybe the ancient Egyptians had technologies that go far beyond what we can even imagine today. What's coming next is so unbelievable that you'll probably want to listen to it at least twice. Number 3. Chloe, the woman who traveled to the year 6000. This case sounds so unbelievable that you can barely take it seriously. And yet, The mysterious woman swears that it happened exactly the way she tells it. A time journey into the year 6000. A journey that, if it truly happened, would change everything we think we know about time, humanity, and the future. Chloe, an older woman from Finland, shown in the footage only with a pixelated face, claims she worked as an economist at Finland's National Science Laboratory in 1966. There, she says she was selected for a top-secret project, one so secret that even most of the lab's employees knew nothing about it. On August 3, 1966, she says she was led into a room secured by heavy metal doors. In the center stood a strange chair with straps, cables, and a helmet made of shiny metal. The scientists asked her to sit down. Then, Chloe says, her arms and legs were strapped in, and someone lowered a tube-like device onto her head. This tube was meant to send electric currents through her body in order, according to the plan, to trigger a temporal shift. Chloe recalls, "I felt the electricity running through me. Everything vibrated, the light turned white, and in the next moment, I was gone." When she came to again, she was lying in the middle of a street. The sun was blazing overhead. But something was off. The buildings looked enormous, organic, almost as if they were made of glass and plants at the same time. The sky had a different color, and on the horizon she saw gigantic structures floating in the air that looked like cities. She had no idea where, or when, she was. A short time later, she learned the answer. She was in the year 6000. Earth still existed, but nothing like she remembered it. The sun was closer to the planet, and the heat was unbearable. According to Chloe, temperatures reached up to 70 degrees Celsius. Entire continents were scorched. Oceans had dried up. But after this catastrophe, she says, Earth's balance slowly recovered. Humanity survived and built a completely new civilization. She describes tall, floating structures where people lived in deep connection with nature. Plants grew along the facades, roots and leaves wrapped around metallic towers. In these cities, there was an almost complete silence, as if nature itself had taken command again. But that wasn't all. Chloe says she saw that dinosaurs once again lived on Earth. According to her, they had been brought back using genetic technologies in the year 4529. At first, they only existed in zoos, but then they were released. People believed they would be peaceful. A fatal mistake. The dinosaurs supposedly spread out and dominated entire ecosystems. And then Chloe talks about something that made even skeptics raise their eyebrows. A plant she calls Roklarulo. This plant, she says, was the main food source for the resurrected dinosaurs. A sturdy, root-like species whose leaves shimmered like glass and whose fibers could store energy. She claims it was so widespread in the future that entire cities were illuminated by its glow. And now things get really mysterious. Because as proof of her journey, Chloe showed a strange object, a root-like substance that looked like a mixture of plastic and wood. She claimed she secretly brought it back from the future. Many people saw nothing more than a piece of synthetic material. But others noticed, under UV light, it reflected a faint greenish glow, as if it were actually biologically active. So is this really a substance from the year 6000, or just a cleverly crafted prop? But Chloe's story goes even further. She claims that starting around the year 2300, humanity will wear tiny recording chips in their eyes, devices that store every memory and make crime impossible. She says this technology made the world more peaceful, but also completely destroyed any form of privacy. At the end of her account, Chloe says in a firm voice, "The sun will move closer to the earth. There will be the greatest fire humanity has ever seen. And after that, everything starts again." Could Chloe really be a time traveler who witnessed the end and the rebirth of humanity? Or is she simply someone with an extremely vivid imagination? Whether her story is true or not, what she describes is very, very intriguing. Trust me, the next case is one of the strangest you've ever heard. Number 2. Warnings from the future. This case is definitely going to surprise you. And you'll probably be hearing it for the very first time, because it connects politics, history, and one of the most captivating topics of all, time travel. In the 1990s and early 2000s, strange speculations kept popping up in Spanish-language forums and archives. They revolved around none other than Fidel Castro, the former president of Cuba, and the question of how he supposedly managed to survive more than 600 assassination attempts. Officially, it is known that the CIA is said to have tried multiple times in the 1960s and 70s to kill Castro, using poison, explosive traps, snipers, and even poisoned cigars. But none of these attempts succeeded. Time and time again, something unexpected happened. A phone call interrupted the plan, an assassin backed out, a car randomly turned a different way at the very last moment. At some point, it all started to feel almost supernatural, and people in the forums began to ask, how could one man survive so many attempts on his life, always narrowly, often by just seconds? Was it pure coincidence? Or did Castro actually receive help from a mysterious source no one thought possible? This is exactly where the theory begins, that still circulates today in secret discussion circles. Some claim that Castro had access to information from the future, warnings that reached him just in time before assassination attempts. These messages, they say, weren't delivered by people, but through time travel communication, meaning transmissions from another timeline. Several forums pointed out that in the 1970s, Castro's security detail suddenly began using new surveillance devices that were supposedly based on technologies far beyond what officially existed at the time. Some believed these devices were part of a secret information system based on quantum field technology, the theoretical foundation of many time travel experiments. Some researchers link this story directly to the infamous Montauk project in the United States, which supposedly carried out experiments on time travel, consciousness projection, and remote viewing in the 1980s. According to these theories, information was sent back into the past, targeted at specific individuals who were politically or strategically important. And this is where it gets extremely exciting. There are reports that in the 1970s, the United States supposedly experimented with so-called time windows, brief, unstable channels through which messages or visual information could be projected into the past. If this technology actually existed, it could theoretically have been used to send secret signals to enemies or targets. Some people believe that Castro himself learned about this, or that people in his inner circle somehow gained access to this information. How else do you explain that he survived every attempt over decades, often thanks to coincidences no one could have predicted? Of course, there is no official proof for any of these claims, but Castro's survival record is so incredible that it still amazes historians today. Over 600 assassination attempts, and not a single one successful. Castro himself even joked once, "If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic sport, I would have already won the gold medal." But what if it was more than just luck? What if someone or something really did warn him just seconds before it was too late? If it is truly possible to manipulate timelines, as some physicists and researchers like David Wilcock claim, then Castro may have been one of the few people who became part of a time travel experiment. Absolutely fascinating. Ready for the finale? Then pay close attention now. Number 1. The time traveler from the year 2048. This incident is by far one of the craziest events ever linked to time travel. The case is actually documented, and in 2017, outlets like Newsweek, Fox News, ABC, and The Independent all reported on it in detail. In October 2017, a very strange-looking man walked into a police station in the city of Casper, Wyoming, clearly agitated, confused, and apparently also drunk. But what he told the officers left them completely speechless. He claimed he was from the year 2048, and he said he wasn't here by accident. He had been sent on behalf of the future to warn humanity and prevent its destruction. Totally insane. The man called himself Bryant Johnson. He said he was part of a time travel mission, and that he had information about an upcoming alien invasion that would begin in the year 2018. He insisted he urgently needed to speak to the president of the town in order to prepare the authorities for the coming catastrophe. The officers took down his statement, at first amused, then clearly unsettled. Because Bryant Johnson swore that everything he was saying was true and absolutely had to be recorded. He claimed that he had not come here voluntarily, but had been thrown into the year 2017 by a time travel experiment. However, there had been a miscalibration, which is why he arrived 1 year too early. When the officers asked him how he had traveled through time, he simply replied that the process was very complicated and that not everyone would survive it. His mission: to warn humanity and make sure people prepared for the arrival of the extraterrestrials. He repeatedly emphasized that the invasion could not be stopped, but that people had to understand it. The aliens, he said, would appear peaceful at first, before slowly starting to take control, piece by piece. According to the police report, Bryant Johnson was heavily intoxicated. Of course, the first thought is just a drunk guy spinning a wild story. But even though he was classified as drunk, the officers noticed something. He told his story with incredible calm and conviction. He didn't seem panicked, not confused, more like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Some of the details of his statement spread across the internet. He supposedly mentioned that time travel would only become possible starting in the year 2028, a technology originally developed by the US government and later perfected by alien advisors. Many people thought he was mentally ill, but others asked themselves, why was he so incredibly precise in his statements? Why did he sound like someone recalling a clear mission and not a fantasy? In fact, official police reports documenting his arrest and his statements do exist. The case was mentioned in several US media outlets, which is pretty unusual for a simple, drunk and disorderly story. Some believe Bryant Johnson really was a failed time traveler whose arrival was miscalibrated. Maybe he really was a messenger from the future who ended up in the wrong year, a time when nobody would take him seriously. If that's true, then his mission was doomed from the very beginning. Some theorists, however, suspect that Bryant Johnson didn't come from our future, but from a different timeline, an alternative version of reality. In physics, people talk about so-called parallel timelines. When a decision or an event changes the course of history, a new reality is created, one that is similar to ours, but not completely identical. So anyone traveling from such a timeline does not necessarily arrive in their own past, but possibly in another, in a world that looks familiar to them, but is in fact a different branch of history. If that's true, then Bryant Johnson may never have traveled into his own past at all, but into ours. And that could explain why the alien invasion he predicted for 2018 never happened. In his reality, it may have taken place, but in our timeline, it, at least so far, has not. And yet, there are people who believe that this warning was anything but meaningless. Maybe the invasion in our reality simply hasn't happened yet, and the key word here is yet, and might only occur slightly later, in a few years. If that's the case, then Bryant Johnson may not have been a madman at all, but a messenger from the future who simply arrived at the wrong time. Did Bryant Johnson actually tell the truth? And is the real warning still ahead of us? We'll find out. Or maybe we won't. What do you think? Is there really more behind these stories than we can imagine? Which case fascinated you personally the most? Let us know in the comments below. We're really excited to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. Thank you so much.